Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with author, comics creator Charles Santino. Charles, thank you for joining, and you have magnificent headphones, microphone. I can tell you're ready for this.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me on. And if it's not obvious what I'm plugging by by my hat and the cover behind me, then you're really not paying attention.
This is true. This is true. I see Rammur back there over your shoulder, as well as on your hat, and we'll certainly talk about the inspiration behind this character, this world. Curious about your origin story. How did you get into storytelling and
Sure.
comics?
Do you remember the second series of Savage Tales from Marvel?
I do.
Yeah, the first series was Conan, and then Khazar, and then in the mid '80s they started kind of a men's adventure anthology. It was called Savage Tales. It didn't conflict with the other one because they dropped it and started doing Savage Sword of Conan. So Savage Tales Volume 2 was playing on the popularity of Indiana Jones. And so they decided to create this men's adventure anthology. It could have Westerns, it could have war stories. And I looked at that and I thought, that's a pretty good entry point for me because I'll submit a self-contained little story, an adventure story. And I had been reading Jack London at the time. And I
Mhm.
thought, okay, I want to do an Alaskan adventure story. And I kept it real short, 4 pages, and submitted it to Larry Hama, who was editing Savage Tales Volume 2. And it was accepted. So it was the first thing I submitted to Marvel, and it was accepted. I figured this is a lot easier an entrance point than trying to write Spider-Man.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that worked out. It ended up being published as the last story in the last issue, which was number 8, and has an amazing cover by Joe Jusko, who was just getting started at the time. So that's how I got started. That led to writing Conan for Marvel Comics, and I even did some of their humor books, which was their parody of superhero stuff. So I started out with adventure and humor, and
Mhm.
took me literally close to 40 years to ever write an actual superhero comic. What you see in back of me, Rammur, and we'll talk about him eventually. Not really a superhero. He's not superpowered. He does have some fancy gear, but he has no powers other than being able to steal things and having pretty much any woman that looks at him fall for him.
There you go. There you go.
Two
Not a
pretty
bad
good,
one.
yeah, two pretty good powers to have, even if they're not superpowers. And it's been a very unconventional career. Haven't really done much for the mainstream. It's mostly been for publishers like Penguin and Bantam Books. I did the first graphic novel based on the work of Louis L'Amour, the Western writer. Did a graphic novel in the Philippines, Oceana, co-created with a Filipino publisher. That became a Netflix cartoon down there. So you've
Mhm.
heard the phrase "big in Japan." I'm big in
Mhm.
the Philippines. So,
Nice.
so
Awesome.
I kind of been all over the place, and Rammer is really the first thing that I've done that's all me. And by all me, I mean my influence. I'm not drawing it. I like to say I'm doing everything except drawing it.
Nice. Speaking of those influences, I'm curious, Master Thief in a future police state, what were the ingredients? What were the influences here as far as how the story came to be for you?
Well, I love heist stories, and I prefer crime and heist stories to mysteries. With a mystery story, a typical whodunit, I'm always, I'm never happy with those stories because if I read a mystery story and I figure out who did it, I think the story wasn't clever enough. And if I don't figure out who did it, I think I'm not clever enough. So it's a no-win situation. I like a story where it's from the point of view of the criminal, and the suspense is, are they going to get caught? So I wanted to do something that was a heist story, and I wanted to give it as many twists as I could. I figured if I set it in the future, then I could show a lot of science fictional stuff that I couldn't show in a present day story. And I decided to give it even some more twists. I figured if it's a police state, a future police state, then being a master criminal is going to be even tougher
Hmm.
because there's cameras and robot cops everywhere. The future is an indeterminate year. I never give the year. It's just far enough in the future that all the tech you see in there is done. It's all there. I also decided rather than have a dystopian sort of rundown future to make it bright and shiny. And the way I did that was I had them perfect hydrogen power, which they've been 40 years they've been talking about cold fusion and hydrogen power. Well, in this scenario, they finally figured it out. So this totalitarian government, which has its boot heel on the neck of the population, can actually provide a pretty comfortable standard of living because energy is so dirt cheap, it's almost free.
Hmm. Hmm.
So everybody lives pretty well, but they're always looking over their shoulder and making sure they're not saying anything bad about the police state they live in. And the police state, the GFA, the Global Freedom Authority, runs the entire planet. And
Hmm.
I don't really get too much into the details of them, just enough to create a backdrop. There is a feature within this in the a comic called Tops, which you can see that word over my shoulder there. Tales of the Police State. It's a comic within the comic, and these are depressing little vignettes without Rammur about life in the police state. Although Rammur is actually going to work his way into one of those stories in the future, they're mostly not about him, and the art styles there can be a little bit more varied. It's also a good way for me to try out new artists by giving them a 2 or a 4 or a 6 page story to see how that works out. Rammur also has a lead story that's usually 24 to 34 pages, and then a backup Rammur story, which will be 4 or 6 pages. I also try out new artists there. The entire package is 48 pages plus the covers, and every single story is self-contained. So
Nice,
the
nice.
first issue has I think it's 20, is it 24? And then a 6 page story, and then the top story. Every single story is self contained. The second issue, which is here, and this is
Lovely.
available, this is out on Amazon. Same deal. If you read the second story, there are references to the first one, but you don't have to read both of them to understand what's going on. The It also says, and it's a little cut off there on the camera, you can see the Corvus trilogy.
Hmm.
That's a marketing gimmick. The the three lead stories in the first 3 issues do kind of sort of involve a bad guy named Corvus, and the publisher Marcosia wanted packaging. So the first 3 issues will eventually be collected, and it'll be called the Corvus trilogy. That's part one behind me. I just held up part two, but it's all self-contained stories with loosely connected. I try to reward the longtime reader without discouraging the casual reader. And I think
Excellent.
comics don't really do that anymore today. Comics today have shown the casual reader the door.
Mhm.
Uh, Stanley used to say, every comic is somebody's first comic.
True.
And that idea has pretty much been forgotten.
Yeah, I love the standalone because then you can jump in at any point. You can go back, you can check out other things. Very smart storytelling.
And what I also do is I have free giveaways of about 16 pages, PDFs for the first issue and the second issue. And I do have complete stories in the giveaway. They're short. There'll be a teaser for the lead story, but some of these shorter stories are complete in the giveaway. So this way, somebody can dip their toe in without spending a dime and decide whether they want to go to Amazon or elsewhere and actually jump right in. I've
Cool.
also got the cover for the third issue.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love
So here
the
you've got,
central focus on the characters there. That's cool.
yeah, you've got all the basic elements. The robot cops, Rammur, the gold, and the babe who's more interested in the gold and doesn't even realize that trouble is right behind him. If you recognize the layout of this, this is an homage to Conan the Barbarian #8, a cover
Nice.
by Barry Smith.
Very nice.
Obviously, uh, very different characters. Now that this art is by Facundo Moyano. He's an Argentina artist. The cover in back of me is Paulo Perez, Brazilian artist, and Paulo Perez has done the lead story in the first three issues.
Cool. Cool, cool.
Most of my artists are overseas. Some of them find me, and other artists, I find them. And the internet is great for that. You got to have a sixth sense, though, about who's going to work out and who isn't.
Hmm.
There's some pretty flaky people out there, and Facebook is filled with horror stories about artists just kind of disappearing. I've had some pretty good luck so far, but I do try everybody out first on a short story.
No, no. You mentioned that you have a kind of a different writing style. There's a specific approach that you take. What would you like to share about that?
Yeah, and this actually used to be done quite a bit by writers who were not artists way back in the 30s, 40s, even into the 50s. I call it storyboard scripting. I actually sketch the story in really, really crude chicken scratches. They're so crude that I have to write the script based on my chicken scratches as soon as possible, because a week later I'll look at them. I have no idea what I'm looking at. That's how crude they are. So I'll start with a 25 word premise for a story. And I actually try to stick to 25 words just for that discipline. And when that description, the premise of that story is so compelling that I have to write the story, then I know I'm ready. I'll then write a 5 or 6 page outline for, let's say, a 25-page story. it could be 5, 6, 7 pages just describing the plot. I don't go to script at that point. At that point, I actually get a sketch pad out and I draw the story to see if it's going to work visually. And a lot of times when I'm doing that, I'll look at the page on my plotting or the writing, and I'll go, okay, here's what's supposed to happen on this page, and I'll start sketching it, and I'll realize that's that's not going to look right. That's not really visually that interesting. Wouldn't it be more interesting if I do such and such here? So the story changes quite a bit during that sketch process. Once the story is all sketched out, 24 pages, 30 pages, whatever it is, then I write the script based on what I quote unquote drew.
Hmm.
The artist never sees my chicken scratches unless I really need to. I just can't describe something in words. I have to show them, and then I'll tighten up the picture a little bit. But I'm not an artist, can't draw, but I can visualize the panel by panel breakdown. Now, Mike Barron does this. He probably could draw, but he does this as well. I believe Alan Moore does this. And I think there's somebody else who does it as well. I really recommend it for anybody who wants to write comics or is writing comics. Before you get to the script, try sketching it out. And sometimes I think you'll be shocked at what happens. You'll realize I can't ask an artist to draw this because
Hmm.
I'm asking him to draw something or her that can't be drawn. It's just not visually right. Especially budding artists tend to have two or three things happening in the
Yeah.
same panel instead of stretching it out. So it's a great way to help your artist. I consider myself an artist's writer. Very rarely do they come back to me and say, I don't know what you want here. I can't, I can't figure this out. I can't draw it. And a lot of times when I get the art back, it's very, very similar to the layout that I did not give them and did not describe, simply
Funny.
because I am writing a script based on a layout.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
And I
cool.
will give the artist lots of photo reference and other reference so that they don't have to spend a lot of time figuring out. Like if there's a building that I want, instead of describing the building, I'll go find a picture of a building that looks just like it. And you just use this.
Nice, nice. Now the movement from like word to visual and word, it's a really interesting thing. So very cool to hear about. Yeah. Any particular shout outs that you want to give to supporters? You've mentioned several artists that have worked with you, but any collaborators that you'd like to mention before we tell people where they can find the work?
I'd like to start by shouting out to my publisher, Marcosia, and Harry Marcos, who's been at this quite a while in England. Like so many expatriates, I had to go to England to get published. Now Harry gets 100 submissions a month,
Wow.
and he picks maybe one. And this is my third project with him, so I'm 3 for 3, and that means I beat out 297 other proposals.
Wow.
He's the largest independent publisher in England. He's got a list of about 400 titles, and he's super easy to work with. I told him this is going to be a PG-13 book, and he said, "Fine, then just do whatever you want to do."
Cool.
So I already shouted out to Paulo Perez, who's my main artist on the first 3 books. Facundo Moyano, who's the cover artist, except for that one behind me, and will be taking over as the main artist on the second set of 3. Let's see, there's an Italian artist. Um, hold on. Let's see. Marco Perugini. Marco, he found me. He's done a bunch of short stories for me, and a lot of artists in each issue. There'll be at least four artists in each issue, so it's a nice variety pack, a nice anthology.
Very cool. And
Oh, I
well,
did
that
want to
question.
mention, I did want to mention why it's called Rammur.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
On his chest, under that shirt, is a ram scoop, and if you've read science fiction, you'll know what a ram scoop is. It sucks in hydrogen and converts it through a cold fusion process. That's powers his leg jets, his wrist blasters. So that's why it's called Rammur. Now, why isn't it ER? Because I wanted the web address. So I typed in Rammur, www.rammer.com, and that is a company in Norway that manufactures heavy equipment for building roads. So that was taken. Then I thought, okay, let's run down the other vowels. How about AR? Still sounds like Rammer. That was a chain of grocery stores in Turkey. So that was taken. I thought, oh, I'm running out of vowels here. How about Rammur? That was free and clear. So I grabbed it and I figured, you know what? A little weirdness doesn't hurt when it's comics and science fiction, makes it a little more distinctive, made
Mhm.
it very easy to trademark. The name is now trademarked. And the weirder your name is, the easier it is to trademark.
Very cool. There it is. I love that kind of like a garage band story. How does the name come to be? So cool. Very cool.
Yep.
And the presence of the science with the science fiction, which is a must if it's true science fiction.
Yeah, I figured, okay, so he's got a compact fusion reactor on his back, and you might say, well, that's kind of ridiculous. Is that any more ridiculous than a guy who was bitten by a radioactive spider? So, this is comics.
Yeah, exactly. Embrace it. Embrace it.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Amazon. Are there other places
Yep.
where folks can go?
Yeah, if you put my name into the internet, you'll find a lot of stuff. Amazon has pretty much everything I've written. A lot of it is in print. Other stuff is back issues, but Rammer is there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter X, and I'm on Instagram. So you can find me in all of those places. I also want to shout out to Randy Zimmerman and Russ Leach. The Atlantean is their Cull, Robert E. Howard Cull series, because he's now in the public domain. And they adapted the Shadow Kingdom as a one shot, and now they have a magazine called the Atlantean, and I contribute a short story to the second issue that actually launches today on Fund My Comic. So
Cool.
I'm in there. I did Conan a million years ago. Now I'm doing Cull. And hopefully, Robert E. Howard is not spinning in his grave. Hopefully, he is smiling at what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm so glad to be in touch with you. It's an open
Yeah, thank
invitation
you for having
anytime.
me. Yeah,
Yeah, of course, of course. Anytime you want to talk about creating, you're welcome to stop by this Zoom space. And many, many thanks and many good wishes for success on Rammer as well.
thank you very much.